welcome leaders of volunteers and bespoke software customers and VSys One clients. I am Dana Litwin. I'm part of the VSys Voices, which is a benefit that Bespoke offers to you, our beloved customers, to create content like this. Today we are talking about how to do online production, and here are some tips and some techniques that I use that work really well, that I've seen work with other online conferences and volunteer recognition events. And this really builds on what we talked about in our previous panel on virtual recognition events and celebrating volunteers, volunteer appreciation online. Budgeting for online and virtual events. Pretty different from putting on a live event, but also in a lot of ways kind of easier, just a little bit different. We don't have to rent a venue, get a bunch of catered food and beverages, and we probably don't have to enlist a lot of one-time only or special event or drop-in volunteers to help with the effort of setup and cleanup and running the event. We do possibly want to think about the budget for production values. Again, we can use the tools we have, smartphones and natural lights, or I'm using a ring light right now. That's not terribly expensive. It's a great investment if you're going to be making more content on a more regular basis. And we also might want to recruit some specially skilled AV and production and media savvy volunteers. Check amongst the people who are already in your volunteer talent pool. It's really wonderful to get really just a survey or a list or a specific ask of, hey, we're looking for folks who have done some editing, have done some video production, would like to be involved on a committee. If you form an event committee for a virtual event, that can be just as engaging as having volunteers or other stakeholders involved with, how you used to put on an in real life at a venue event. For budget purposes, the biggest expense is probably going to be if you must use a streaming service that you're not paying for yet, or some other kind of video production. You can absolutely hire a production crew, few people. They can do a lot remotely to help you with this. You can recruit specifically skilled volunteers through local high school and college media programs, film track programs, television production majors. All of these folks are out there with the skills to do it. And again, you might have someone who is a major media producer, that's part of their jobby job, that's different than what they do as a volunteer with you. And maybe you've already got these skills also in your PR or development or marketing department in your agency. So communicate with all the other departments, pool your resources, check out the talents that already exist in your volunteer community that's working with your agency, and you can probably find people to specifically help with some of the steps that we're going over in this video today. So what type of event are you creating? Are you producing? And think about how much has to be live and how much can be pre-recorded. In general, it's going to be a lot easier to create something that has mainly pre-recorded elements. So some categories you can think about is any kind of training. Volunteer training doesn't have to go out broadcast live. It can be pre-recorded, and you can use that content over and over again, have it on your website, put it on social media, have it on an intranet available just to your volunteers through your volunteer management software login or a portal. Some people use that, and some people use something like a Facebook group or some other online forum to help inform their volunteers of updates and things like that. Or, put it in an email, put a YouTube link that's set to private or link only, and do it that way. But using this content that's pre-recorded, you can also edit it into other little useful pieces to share on social media, or just use as promo for the agency, or to shout out and celebrate some of your wonderful volunteers and donors and other community advocates and supporters that are working with your agency. So sometimes we do want to do something that feels live. It generally is a little more engaging to have something live, whether that's for a conference presentation or a certain kind of interactive training where you really want to have some very robust question and answer sessions, or a nice volunteer recognition event where some parts are pre-recorded, like somebody at the Oscars or the Emmys accepting their award from their remote location. Use that trick that, you know, the big kids do, that the big productions do. It's the same basic concept. As much as possible can be pre-recorded and then worked into with a little outline and a script of cues of where that happens and where you go to, say, a live special guest host or however you want to format your event. It's also worth mentioning that how we did things for in-person volunteer recognition events is pretty different for when we're pivoting to online or virtual productions, but it's the same basic elements. You have a production plan, you have a timeline, you know who is doing which task or thing in the process and during the show. And we'll go into our next section right now and talk about what does that look like? What does that production plan look like? So here we go. Production and scope planning, writing the script, the outline, it can take anywhere from a few hours. If someone's used to doing this, they already have these skills exist within your paid staff and volunteer talent pool, or it can take a few weeks to really iron out all the details depending on how complicated of a virtual or online event you're trying to do. If you're doing a one-off awards ceremony or recognition event for volunteers, yeah, that might be a little more complicated, but again, the more you have pre-recorded material from some award recipients, that's easier to kind of weave in than worry about, ooh, what happens if something goes wrong live on the air. Or you might be setting up to create a training series or a series of fun social media features or little promos for the agency featuring your volunteers and your donors and your other advocates and supporters in the community. Whatever it is, there's a lot of people who know how to do this, and a lot of them have free time in the pandemic. So many friends of mine are in live event and television and film production, and they don't have enough to do right now. So whether you want to find a paid professional crew at a really good rate or a partial pro bono donation rate, that's not hard to do right now in early 2021 when production is shut down. But you might have all of this in-house. It doesn't have to be that complicated. It doesn't have to be a giant Hollywood production. And if you're doing an ongoing series or e-learning, yeah, just, find a script and a production plan and an outline and create something that's just going to be really consistent and pretty easy to replicate. Once you create some of this content, you can keep using it in big and little pieces. The real magic of all of this is editing. Now for editing, whether you have a highly skilled volunteer doing it or there's someone in-house in your agency who already has that skill, if you're assigning volunteers or award recipients to do this at home, great. Have them just record something with pretty decent light and pretty decent sound. That's a segment that you can work into what you're creating. If you have a lot of material that's pre-recorded that you want to edit, or you're creating a series, or you're creating e-learning or some other kind of training series, absolutely hire a pro. It's worth it. There's a lot of very, very talented video editors, producers, even directors, and cinematographers that don't have enough work right now. So let's give those fine, talented people some of the work that we have. Most smartphones or desktop or tablet operating systems these days have iMovie or QuickTime or Adobe or Windows Media. There's usually something that has an editing function and maybe some basic effects and titles included in the technology that you probably already have, or some of your volunteers already have, that can contribute this skill. As if you're interested in learning more about editing, a great free program that I love to use and a lot of my friends love to use is called DaVinci. It has almost pro level functions, and if you're working with a pro bono volunteer, highly skilled editor, they will absolutely have all the right software to do it themselves. You won't have to worry about that in your budget. But if you want to invest in something like that, typically the standards are Final Cut Pro or Adobe or Avid tend to be the professional standards these days for editing software. Lighting and sound. Something that is absolutely possible with these smartphones and the level of consumer technology that most of us have access to these days is pretty high quality, if not actual HD high def video function within most smartphones. And since you've got that level of technology, you can use something like I'm using right now, a really simple ring light. Usually a ring light setup is, $100 or $200 if your agency is going to be creating a lot of content. If you do not already have something like a ring light, that's a great investment. That's something that's pretty easy on the budget to invest in, that's worthwhile. If you're having something like this room that I'm in right now that is an easy backdrop to add graphics to and is pretty well insulated from outside sounds. If you're filming something outside, like in previous sections of this video, yeah, you take the chance that a dog is barking or a car is driving by or an airplane's going over or some other noise occurs, someone's talking in the background or walking by. That just adds to the production time and number of takes, number of times you have to try to record something to get a good result. It's always easier to control your light and your sound when you are indoors. And to make sure that the light is coming at your face in a soft way, if it's coming from a window, that it's not doing, one side of your face in shadow, the other side very brightly lit. We call that a soft light. So make sure that you have a soft light. Again, the sound quality in most smartphones or consumer technology around video is, I don't need to have a lavalier or an extra microphone. You can if you want to. It's great. It just makes another little complication of something else to do to both control the quality of your sound, so that's the advantage, and have something else that can go wrong or can malfunction if you're depending on it, and something else for the editor, again, whether it's a pro bono volunteer, you've hired an editor to work with. So figure out what kind of technology you have, and you probably can get a pretty great result with just the phone that you have for your person, and telling your volunteers or other people who might be pre-recording something to add content to your production a couple little tips of, hey, don't have something that's coming at an unflattering angle. Don't have something that's too steep down or too steep up. Pretty straight on or a little bit above is usually the most flattering angle. Taking a quick look in the mirror before you produce something. It's sometimes not easy to look at ourselves or hear the sound of our own voice, but it's absolutely worth it to just, run a brush through the hair, maybe a little light foundation makeup. If you're using artificial light or it's really strong light from outside, that just helps everybody see your facial expressions and understand what's going on in the video. Something to keep in mind for what you're wearing when you're filming, doing a video is, stripes like this are good and fine, but don't use any really tiny polka dots or small patterns or kind of houndstooth type patterns. Those will do what's called strobing. They'll create this kind of weird visual effect that's very distracting. So just, solid colors or medium size or large stripes, larger patterns, those are going to work well for if you're dressing for broadcast or filming. If you're using a green screen, one of the very pro production tips and tricks that's fun to use these days with all of our videos, but especially if you're getting a little tired of the same Zoom or virtual backgrounds, is it's pretty easy to use a green screen, just like this. This is one brand of green screen that you can have. It's an easy pop-out type. Yay, hold it up even higher. An easy pop-out type of green screen. So let's show you how this works. And with green screen, depending on the light source and how you're lit, inside or outside, you might get a little bit of shadows and things. And what's happening is the editor that you are using as a pro bono volunteer or among your employees or someone that you hire as a contractor, they're going to do what's called keying in. They're going to key in a background over the green behind you. And that's why in the what to wear segment I mentioned, don't wear a shade of green that matches the background that you're using. So if you want to use a practical, it's called practical when it's a real thing, when you want to use a practical green screen kit, it can really be a lot of fun. And especially if you're doing this as a new creative venture to teach yourself some new skills in lighting and production, it's really fun to play around with what looks good. And hope that you enjoy your special effects. Maybe my editor will have me be doing something really goofy right now. Whatever type of production you're doing, the best platforms to use are, again, pre-recording on a smartphone and sending files through sites like WeTransfer, which is for free for large files, or G Drive. You can usually transfer files over Google, or you might have Dropbox or something like that. But the main thing to think about is if you are broadcasting a live event, there's going to be a lag time. That's just the laws of physics. So depending on how much you are trying to coordinate people speaking together, it's difficult but not impossible to coordinate live music playing together, but pre-recorded music or soundtrack is ideal if that's an element in what you're producing for an event or an ongoing series. But when you're going out live, in my experience, I don't work for any of these companies, it really is ideal if you're using Zoom that can broadcast automatically out to YouTube and a bunch of other social media channels simultaneously. That's probably the way to do it is, for example, a Zoom broadcasting live out to YouTube. There are also services, usually paid services, or sometimes there's a free trial or very low cost tier that will take your Zoom recording, meeting, broadcast, and put that streaming live, typically with about a 30 to 60 second delay. I've usually found it has set to a 30-second delay, so you can try to fix things on the fly, out to any social media platform, including Facebook Live. What doesn't always work, although it's still pretty popular to use, is trying to do an entire event just with Facebook Live. Now, there are a number of issues, not the least of which is it tends to have a lot of lag time. Lag time is impacted by the speed and quality of the internet connection of whomever is broadcasting, but it also has to do with different apps and platforms having kind of the water pressure of how they're sending their signal out. So I personally have encountered quite a lot of problems using Facebook Live, and if you are using any music, whether it's pre-recorded or original, that also can cause problems where just the signal cuts in and out, you can't hear it clearly. And also Facebook, because of pressure from very many music publishing companies, they're really, really strict about music copyright. So if you do not have the rights, or this is not absolutely original music, and you're trying to broadcast it on Facebook Live, that's probably going to be a pretty major shutdown, and you might get your whole production stopped. So typically using something like Zoom or the online meeting platform of your choice, and then using a streaming bundling service to broadcast it out is going to be the best bet. I've had a lot of friends and colleagues have good results using Twitch. Now, Twitch is a platform and a website that is typically and mostly used for online gaming, but because it's used for online gaming, it's developed a really great technology to reduce that live lag time and live response time. So more and more nonprofits, especially theater groups or performance groups or celebrations of volunteers, are actually broadcasting pretty directly from wherever they're videoing to Twitch to get the best, most reduced lag time possible for their event. Thanks again, all of you, for being Bespoke software customers, and I and all the other VSys Voices are always here for you as a resource. So feel free to get in touch with us as a group, individually, and we hope that you've enjoyed this video on production tips for bringing events online. We'll see you next time.